We need to talk about this, and this, and this. In the midst of a growing disquiet about how the AI revolution is proceeding, opinions that sometimes overlook the many individuals and businesses that get real value out of this technology, there is a big risk that, in my opinion, is being almost totally ignored. And if you're using AI for your job or you've deployed it in your business, this is probably something you're going to want to start considering and have a plan for, whether or not the AI naysayers are right or wrong. Keep watching to find out what you need in your plan. My name is Nick DeCourcy. I'm a Microsoft 365 consultant who specialises in AI adoption for small and medium-sized businesses. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for Microsoft 365 Copilot. If you're interested in keeping up with AI advancements, make sure you get subscribed to the channel and drop this video a like so you get to see more from me in the future. And if you're interested in working with me, check out the links down in the video description to get in contact. Let's do a thought experiment. You're running a 1,000 person business, and one day an opportunity comes along to outsource the work one of your departments does. You shrink your workforce by something in the order of 30 to 60 employees, 3% to 6% of your labour capacity, and shift those activities under contract to a third party. What would that contract look like? What assurances would it give you? And what risks would you identify and manage before pulling the trigger? Now, let's take that same scenario, but apply it to an off-the-shelf AI solution like Microsoft 365 Copilot. Microsoft's own figures suggest that it can boost productivity by about 3%, while other studies suggest more, approaching up to 6%. So it enables you to take on more work or perhaps shrink your team. You start to pass some of the responsibility for providing capacity to do work that generates your revenue from your business and your human workers to Microsoft and their digital intelligence. But in this case, what does your contract with Microsoft look like? What assurances do they give you? And have you taken the time to identify and manage the risks before ploughing forward with adoption? And if you've chosen Google Workspace or some other tool for your AI, you could ask exactly the same questions. This isn't a Microsoft-only concern. The day-to-day discussion about AI has become so hyperbolic and binary that it's easy to neglect the fact that there are already real businesses getting real business value out of these tools every day. They might not be the ones in the headlines who fire half their office in order to be AI first and have to backtrack months later, and the value they're getting is probably nowhere near the effusive promises made by Sam Altman when GPT-5 released last summer. But in organisations large and small, AI is already impacting how work is done, how much work is taken on, and how teams are designed and staffed as a consequence. Each organisation or individual's mileage may vary in terms of the gains delivered by AI, but it's important for us to acknowledge that every business adopting AI is doing something rather new in terms of technology adoption practice. In those organisations, AI has become a core part of the knowledge and labour supply chain they rely on to satisfy customer needs and deliver on their obligations. Yet in no way do our relationships with providers of these tools generally look similar to how we might align with a vendor of physical products or an outsourced staffing services company. AI tooling has become an add-on to an established structure of cloud-delivered capabilities that has become the norm for businesses over the last 2 decades. But in many important ways that we're neglecting to risk assess, those AI add-ons are distinctly different to most of what has come before. First, if you consider the work human team members have traditionally done with a product like Microsoft Word, for example, you could fairly easily pick up those activities and move them over to Google Docs or Apple Pages or even just a notepad and pen, and with a bit of extra legwork and some short-term frustration, you would achieve much the same output. This is because in this scenario, Word is just a tool that is used by humans with the correct capabilities and experience to generate an output. The responsibility for none of the knowledge or decision-making or delivery capacity that's associated with those tasks rests with Microsoft. Their core role in their relationship with you is to provide a tool, albeit a very good one, that could be switched out for any number of other ways of achieving the same outcome. But in the paradigm where AI has been adopted, process knowledge and delivery capacity start to shift from workers into the tools. If you're using Copilot to write half your proposals, then the gap between your AI-powered process and delivering the same with paper and pen becomes far greater. So there is far greater risk in losing that new added capacity. And this problem is compounded by a second issue. It's taken decades for companies like Microsoft and Google to establish the infrastructure that allows them to run cloud services in a consistent way. It's not perfect. We have occasional outages. But in general, the positive impact of these tools is outweighed by the occasional interruptions. The same is just not true for AI. The major providers of cloud services are now racing with each other to build capacity, investing billions of dollars and bringing on board services from third parties, who in comparison to monumental players like Microsoft, are potentially far more fragile businesses where long-term commercial success is far less certain. AI-assisted businesses shift the responsibility to deliver capacity for the work AI helps with onto companies like Microsoft, who, unlike traditional outsourcing contractors, assume very little risk. And in turn, because they need more capacity, they lean on third-party data center providers, which it would probably be fair to say create a far riskier supply chain for these services than has ever been the case, or just deciding to buy some Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace licenses. Long ago, before doing this job, I was often involved in negotiating and managing outsourced services. These were usually agreements that were fairly long-term, very customised to the exact business scenario, and fairly onerous in terms of the outside provider meeting their obligations. In day-to-day operation, even small lapses in service, often with the provider notifying of these lapses due to their contractual terms, would result in focused work to avoid repeated issues and improve. These were highly collaborative arrangements, and even a slight whiff of focus drift on the part of the provider could lead to serious realignment to mitigate delivery risk. And in none of these situations was the outside provider responsible for anything close to 6% of the company's productive capacity. I'm not sure if large enterprises with hundreds of thousands of Microsoft 365 seats have this level of engagement from Microsoft in servicing their agreements, but I know for certain that none of the small and medium-sized businesses I work with do. And this isn't to say there's anything wrong with Microsoft's commercial terms, and certainly in areas like the unambiguous clarity in your rights to own your data, they are better than many providers. But I don't think they were ever envisaged to make sense to scenarios for supplying outsourced digital labour in place of humans. The big tech companies are selling a dream and then scrambling like crazy to build the capacity to deliver it in a situation where hard constraints like access to electricity, water, or hardware components are all somewhat unknown. They manage their risk by pushing these needs onto third-party providers like data center operator CoreWeave, that in turn takes on all those unknowns, but from a position of a much narrower financial foundation than the tech giants. This is one of the main points discussed in that video about AI data centers going unused I referenced earlier and is linked down in the description. Eventual profit is built on a dichotomy where much more AI inference capacity than is currently used must be sold, but it is unclear whether or not that much can be built. This is essentially a summary of the AI bubble argument without going into the details of all the circular financial arrangements. But here's what matters for the businesses watching this. If you're becoming AI first, you're exposed to this entire chain of risk. And almost certainly, you haven't built that into your planning. You saw the delivery responsibility shift to your AI provider, but you probably haven't acknowledged that all the risks stayed with you. Now, I'm really not one for AI hyperbole, so I don't want to overblow what's going on here, but I did want to take the time in this video to relate these points together in a way that becomes specific and actionable for individual businesses, rather than just a "look, the sky is falling" reflection of there being a lot of people who are really concerned about the AI industry as a macro concept. There are sensible ways for you to adopt AI and gain the benefits it can offer, while also managing the risk you're taking on. First, what does that risk actually look like? You're not going to wake up one morning and find that GPT-5 has been deleted, at least not without some cataclysmic event that would make this entire conversation moot. More likely, if the AI bubble starts to burst, or at least deflate, we might see capacity become constrained. There's a really limited set of cloud companies that are actually running their own AI models on their own hardware. A great number of AI-powered tools you see from smaller providers and startups are essentially wrappers around one of the big providers' APIs. For many of these, if providers like OpenAI or Microsoft became constrained in capacity, either they run into service brownouts, or the services they need just rise in price to a point where their business model no longer makes sense. If you're reliant on the AI of a niche provider who fits into this category, then you need to consider that your AI problems might just be a second-order impact of them having the AI issues we're talking about. Now, assuming your situation is using a big provider AI solution like Copilot or Gemini, one of their platforms like Copilot Studio, or directly building against their directly provided AI APIs, then your situation might be a little different. You might find capacity gets constrained. The numbers of chats you can have or tokens you can process becomes more limited, or you're forced into higher pricing tiers. You might find services get slower, or that router tools like the auto model selector in GitHub Copilot start to more often push you towards less capable models. We might even see a provider like OpenAI or Anthropic completely go out of business, though it seems less possible that an AI apocalypse would bring down companies like Microsoft or Google. Yet, a radical shake-up in this industry seems like it could, at the very least, slow down the hyperscalers' capacity roadmap, with impacts trickling down to users of these tools from a wide variety of providers. Of course, this is not financial advice. Perhaps you moved some of your customer service work to an AI agent, and you partially did this because you were having issues consistently staffing your call center. Suddenly, a slow deflation of the AI bubble might cause you to return to a similar set of issues, just now with inconsistency from your digital employees rather than your human ones. So, what should you do to mitigate this risk while working through an adoption plan that allows you to access the AI upside? Here are my 3 key priorities. First, when it comes to AI adoption, we have to acknowledge that all actions that impact capacity also have some impact on human jobs. Adopt Microsoft 365 Copilot and give your team more productive output, and consequently, that team's leader is going to come to you seeking to add an employee a little later in your continued growth than they would have without Copilot. This is just a logical consequence. However, whereas there are some job-related impacts of AI you can't really control, there are others you definitely can. How you reassign saved productive time is important. If you take your team of 10 who are all working overtime, and using Copilot you turn them into a team of 7 who are still all working overtime, if you're ever without that AI assistance, you'd have far less operational flexibility than if you still have a team of 10, all now with a priority of work-life balance. Second, it's important to consider how, while shifting processes and outputs to AI, you still retain understanding and experience in your team. I've done some retail management in my career, and right the way through that time, digital point-of-sale terminals have been the norm. But it's always been important to ensure that at least someone on duty understands how to pull out that archaic paper-based credit card swiper should the need arise, as point-of-sale systems sometimes go down. Our approach with AI adoption must be the same. It's not good enough to simply retain the skill set of human-in-the-loop supervision. You must retain the skills and procedures for hands-on doing of the task should it be necessary. And it's important to acknowledge that often these 2 different skill sets may come from different levels and roles within your team. Last, you may want to reframe the role of technology in your risk management and business continuity plans. We tend to categorise technology along the lines of simply being tools, and this framing carries through where these capabilities sit in terms of importance, investment, and the interest shown to them by stakeholders outside the technology realm. If technology is going to change the place it has within our businesses, then that change must be one that is holistic, taking into account everything from how we enter into contracts, to how we perceive cost impacts, to how much time or effort we are willing to invest in alternatives or backups. Some of these conundrums simply aren't purely technology problems, so they cannot be solved with technology solutions. We need a range of stakeholders with a variety of skills to bring new insights to the table and new management approaches. Our risk mitigations have to be sensible. For example, a reflexive goal might be to diversify AI vendors. But even this is opaque. Great, your app can run GPT-5 in both Microsoft Foundry and OpenAI, but you're just buying the same infrastructure capacity from two different vendors, as OpenAI largely runs on Azure. The co-mingling of assets and circular deals is one of the strongest arguments advocates of the AI bubble make for why we should take this problem seriously. Ultimately, it's impossible to entirely mitigate any of the risks posed by AI, including those we focused on in this video, while continuing to use it. But this is a common strand of thought in risk management. When I was the operations director of an art museum, we often discussed how the best way to mitigate risks to the art was to close the doors and stop accepting guests. But this would make a pretty lousy museum. For most risk management in most businesses, there isn't a firm and certain answer, just a set of acknowledgements, processes, plans and understandings that allow us to bring confident mitigation to managed uncertainty. We must do exactly the same with AI, but we must do it in a new way with a new understanding of what the problems we might face could actually be. I'd be really interested to know what you think about this issue and how you're managing it in your business. Start that conversation down in the comments. Thanks for watching through to the end. I hope this was of value to you. Until the next video, bye bye.